Hello, and welcome to a casual review of Pokemon Sword and Pokemon Shield. Now, what makes this a casual review versus a standard review? Well, for one, I've got no script. For a good reason. I am actually pretty terrible at writing review scripts. Mainly because I often forget things as I'm writing them. And it's much easier for me to just kind of ramble and cut something together that just works. So, sit back, relax, grab a coffee or a soda. Let's talk about Pokemon. The tears of the Dexers. So let's start by actually preferencing why I'm qualified to talk about Pokemon Sword and Pokemon Shield. You see, I've been playing Pokemon my entire life. I've been a Pokemon fan my entire life. I may have been 3 or 4 years old when I first picked up my first game on the Game Boy Pocket, but I definitely started at Gen 1. Meaning I've experienced this franchise throughout the years. And through that lens, we can look at Pokemon Sword and Pokemon Shield and talk about it a bit more objectively, as it fits in with the grand picture of the Pokemon franchise. So without further ado, let's start talking about the game itself. It goes without saying, since we are actually, I want to say 2 weeks out from when the game launched, there will be spoilers. Now I'm going to try to avoid showing any footage of late game, even though I have beaten the game. I beat it in exactly 1 weekend, but I'm going to try not to spoil too much, but I need to talk about certain things and certain aspects of the story in order to actually explain how I feel about them. So, without saying, or it goes without saying, spoiler alert. The Cliff Note versions of this is, I actually really liked the game. I did play it entirely in a single weekend, which means I binged through it. To put into perspective, over the course of exactly 3 days, I put somewhere around 20 to 24 hours into the game. I worked a good chunk of that, but I did have 2 days off, so I was able to sink like 12 hours on those days. The story itself is actually pretty on rails. Much like every other Pokemon game, to be completely honest. You get your first Pokemon, you get your Pokédex, you journey out, you get into some mischief, and then bam. Now, there are a couple of things that I really liked about how the game handled the story. For one, you are literally a brand new Pokemon trainer. And because of that, when the stuff starts to hit the fan and the actual bad things start to happen, they're like, you're not qualified to deal with this. Let us handle it. And then you get involved anyway because you just happen to be the one person that the legendary Pokemon just happens to want to work with. So fortunately for your character, you still get mixed up in it, but they don't tell you to get mixed up in it. I remember back in the Ruby Sapphire days, I thought it was very weird that the champion's like, hey, you want to go beat up this gang of people and their criminal organization that is literally either pirates or I don't know what Team Magma could be best equated to, but loved their hoodie. I digress though. I always thought it was weird how a kid would get involved in taking down a criminal organization, as opposed to how this game handles it, where you are somebody competing to become the champion, but you aren't necessarily that big of a deal. You are just this person in this world who's just good at Pokemon battles. And then you, through other events and other means, end up getting wrapped into the main plot. The story actually doesn't get your character involved in any of the shady stuff until the end. The game actually has a very straightforward one climax story, which means the story builds up to the singular climax and then ends. It's interesting because let's go back to Pokemon Sapphire and Ruby. That game actually had sort of a 2 climax structure where you would have your climax with Kyogre Groudon be on the down tick and then go back up for the Elite Four. This game, it's the championship fight, the events with legendary Pokemon, and then back to the championship fight in one move. Like, there is no break between them from the point that the game is wrapping up to the end of the game. You are on a high. You are on a high note. And yeah, it's a very different story for Pokemon. The credits roll, and then there's some post-credit, like post-game content that allows you to tie up the loose ends that's much slower. So it's actually a very interesting way for them to tell a story in the Pokemon universe. They generally don't do this. That being said, it does kind of leave a lot to be desired. The game itself feels really restricted, and although I sunk 24 hours, short. It does feel short. Mainly because of two factors. When it comes down to it, they made the routes too short, in my opinion. I used the Viridian Forest example as kind of like my baseline for like how long a Pokemon route really should be. The Viridian Forest is literally route, forest, route, with both routes being shorter, and then there's the dungeon. There was a point in the game that actually very much mirrored that layout. It was actually in the early game. I think it was like Route 2. No, not Route 2. It was Route 3. Point is, there is a route in the game that's very much like that, where it's route, dungeon, route, and the two routes are two different ecosystems, and then the dungeon is actually a cave, so it's a whole nother ecosystem. That part of the game felt very much like a normal Pokemon game in length. It wasn't until the next route, which is between the grass and the water gym, that I was like, wait a second, what? When you look on the map, there's this huge stretch between the two gyms. Like, they are on separate sides of this continent. And I'm not even joking. You can skip most of the content on the route. You get on this giant bridge and then you're done. You just pop right into the city, which is weird because if there's a route connected to the first town, there should be a route connected to the second town, and then it feels way too short. It feels like I warped across the map. And in that regard, there are a couple different places where that happens, and it's just sad because the parts of the game that are actually fleshed out and actually explorable are really good. Like, there's this part towards the end of the game where it's actually a beach, but it's cold. So there's like icebergs and all this stuff, and you actually have to like move around. It's your token surf route. And it's just so much better than even like Sun and Moon's water route, where that one was super straightforward. This one's kind of like a labyrinth of ice, and you've got these like super strong Pokemon that are like trying to beat you out of the route, essentially. I love it. It's actually a great area. Unfortunately, I just wish there was more of it. Which kind of brings me to our next point, Pokemon. So the Pokemon in this game are awesome, actually. The new Pokemon, I actually didn't have a single one that I went, what the fudge are you? And to be completely honest, every single one of the designs stood out in my memory. It's a really weird thing. It doesn't usually happen that way, especially past Gen 3, where it's like, yeah, every single one of them, I liked them. The new forms are cool. The addition to extra evolutions to regional forms is a cool idea. The returning classics all look good. In fact, actually, I have no complaints about how the Pokemon look, or even how they battle. I kind of like the simplistic battle style. I know some people were complaining about it, but as someone who played through Gale of Darkness, Colosseum, I remember those battles being too flashy. Like, animations would take too long and battles wouldn't be punchy enough. So I knew that it would be a problem if they went with that style. So I personally don't dislike the simplistic nature of how attacks work. And generally speaking, I haven't been for want when it comes to the Pokemon. Unlike the original rumors that there were like 400 Pokemon in the game, there's actually close to like 800 or something like that. I knew that the number was much higher when I like wasn't seeing too many repeating Pokemon. It's shocking a little bit that so many made it in, yet so many got cut. I don't know. I know that there are a lot of people's favorites that are just not there, but at the same time, I tend to play these games in a way that I use only the new team, which is exactly how I played it the first time around. The second time, which I'm playing through right now, I'm actually going to be mixing my team up to see how much easier it would be, but they do allow you to build a balanced team. Battles in general, though, they feel nice. They're quick. They're exactly how I would expect them to feel, but they're harder this time around. I'm not even joking when I say this. This game actually does a good job of kicking your butt. I haven't felt challenged by a Pokemon game in forever. But this one made me reach for the revives. It made me stock up on potions. It made sure that I actually spent time in the Pokemon Center picking things up. You can swap your Pokemon at any time on the route. That is a feature that I think they added in Let's Go. And you can even swap out Pokemon that you just caught to add them to your party. XP share is on by default, but for a good reason. The game has been rebalanced and reworked. XP share was in many ways a way to break the game in the past. Now, because it's balanced with XP share on, the game will throw Pokemon at you. Wild Pokemon, mind you, at your level. Like they will flat out, like you will complete, like the grass gym is a good example. That gym can be completed around level 15. They'll throw level 20 Pokemon in the wild next to you. Like they'll just go, yeah, here you go. So the game is surprisingly difficult and it scales really well. The wild area, we haven't even talked about that, but we'll get back to that in a second. Trainer battles actually were the easiest part of the game. I thought wild Pokemon were harder than the trainers. And some trainer battles, and I'm not even joking, oh my god, I got endeavored. Focus Sash endeavored in the game, and I was like, what just happened? So, yeah, they will pull some actual tournament ready strategies. Like the last gym of the game, oh my god. The best way to describe it is just straight up Darude Sandstorm. Like constant weather effects. Like the Dragon Gym Leader, I love him because he's the only gym leader ever in the Pokemon series to actually make me think about how I approach his Pokemon. That's saying a lot. I think he actually pulls out Sunny Day and an instant Solar Beam. Like, these are actual strats that like players will employ. It's never been used by a gym leader. So it's like, okay, the wilds. I love it. I love it because it's actually where the future of this franchise should be going. The wild area works in a very MMO way, essentially. The level of the Pokemon in the wild are based off of your level. So, and that's actually based off your gym badges. So something this game does differently with gym badges is you're actually capped at what level you can catch Pokemon at, and then you get like an extra 20 levels for training. So you actually never are told this information. The catching part, yes, but the level that you can train to is like inside your player profile. So I was like, oh man, I can catch up to level 30 Pokemon. Does that mean I can only train to level 30? And like my Pokemon were pushing 30 at that point. No. The way that it works this time around is if a Pokemon is over the level that you can catch, you can't catch it. And if a Pokemon goes above, I think it's like 20 levels above that or something like that, then it won't listen to your commands. So you actually have a lot of room, like a lot of room to train. Much higher than in previous games where like they kept the level cap within like 10 levels of the gym. This time around, it's a wider range, and that's a good thing, because in the wild area, you can catch just about anything. So before you get any gym badges, they're level 15. And I told you the grass gym is level 15. So you can catch Pokemon that will be as strong as the gym in the wild. Then there are stronger Pokemon that are literally like, I don't need to stand in the grass. I don't need camouflage. I can beat up any trainer that comes my way. And they are usually somewhere between, I think in the starting area, they were like 40s. They will go up to level 60. All of the Pokemon in the wild area will go up to level 60. But it's entirely based off your gym badges. So if you have all of the gym badges, everything in the wild is level 60. It caps out. There's no higher levels, which is kind of disappointing because I kind of wanted to actually see it go even higher than that. Like, I would have loved for it to go up to 80 in my opinion, but that's just, I guess, the hardcore enthusiast in me. It was like, I want to face a freaking like level 80 Rhydon. So that pretty much covers that area. It's a sprawling area, like you can go in a lot of places. The only issue I have is there are 3 entrances and 3 exits to the wild. And I personally feel that they should have connected the routes to it. Like, for story reasons, gyms, I'll explain that later, but let's just say it would make more sense to have the wild area as this branching path that you can take to go to the various locations instead of just being this kind of gate that you pass through essentially in the story twice. So yeah, I personally think that was underutilized. Deathmaxing, this replaces both Z and Mega Evolution. Let's be clear, that's exactly what this is. This is a fix for the brokenness of Mega Evolution and the cheesiness of Z moves. So, Dynamax moves are all essentially Z moves. Dynamax Pokemon are essentially Mega Evolved. Some of them even have alternate forms which are just like Mega Evolution. Like even Charizard has a Mega form, essentially, in the game. That being said, you have to catch a Dynamax Pokemon, or a Gigamax Pokemon, which is the one with the alternate form. You may have heard both those terms. So you can only catch them in max raid battles, and those battles are hard, intentionally. They're not supposed to be super easy, but yeah, essentially to get the cool forms, you're going to have to grind. And although they are fun, some of them really do require the use of internet connectivity to play. That being said, you can get a whole bunch of NPCs, and depending on your luck, you might not get completely screwed, but actual players will be preferable because the actual players will pick a Pokemon that won't get one shot by a Gigamaxed Pokemon. All right, let's get into this final part. So I am going to talk about the one thing that this game does way better than any other Pokemon game out there. World building wise, this is the only Pokemon game that makes sense. Now you may be thinking, what do you mean? Well, have you ever asked yourself, how does the Pokemon League make money? Like, have you ever actually asked that question? Or how about, why is it that not every trainer is trying to take out the gyms? Why can you just waltz in and fight a gym leader? Well, this game answers it. The League is invitation only in this game, meaning you have to be invited by somebody who is part of the League. And the League is a heavily televised, stadium-wide event every time a challenger actually challenges a gym, meaning the gyms are making money off the people attending. They're making money off of the television spectacle of it, and they are also streaming it too, so they're making streaming money. And it's like, oh my god, this world makes sense. And the Pokemon League regulates everything in this world. Like, they are regulating which trainers can Dynamax. They are regulating which trainers can even face the gyms. They are regulating the power even, actually. And the battle tower is all regulated by them too. So essentially, like, because of there being one central body that's like paying for everything, they're also making all the money, and it makes so much more sense. The champion, you dethrone him, you become the champion. That's been a plot hole in so many games. I'm not even joking. So, your character, after you beat the champion, actually is like addressed as such, which is a huge thing. So the world itself feels more real. And then also the little feature that I talked about, like big Pokemon will be out and about walking outside the grass, but then the smaller ones will hide in the grass, and then there's other ones that won't even show themselves, that their camouflage is so good. Like, all of this culminates into what is essentially the most realistic Pokemon game, which is something to be said for a game that looks the way that it does. And I guess that kind of segues into the idea of the art style, which is good. I mean, there are parts of the game that look really ugly, not gonna lie. It's obvious that some of the assets from the 3DS were reused. The wild area, those trees, horrendous. Like, I can do better. But the actual game itself can look very pretty. There are points in the game where I stopped and just took a screenshot because it just looked so good. Like, I could pause and zoom in on this area right here in the front with like all of the Wooloo, and it looks so good. But it's a shame it's not a full step in the right direction for the game series. I think stylistically it's great. I think that they have the right direction. They just need to update all those 3DS assets out of there, which is, you know, good for the next game. In my opinion, it is an overall positive response to this game. Like, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed my time with it. I'm replaying it. But I do think the post-game of this game is too short, and I think the actual length of this game is a little short. So to explain why the game is not open enough, the game actually ends with a tournament of tournaments type situation. You face all the challengers who were in the tournament with you. You defeat all of them. And then you face all of the gym leaders who are now in a tournament amongst themselves to take on the champion. Which explains why people would want to be gym leaders, because then they have quick and easy access to fighting the champion. Cool. That explains a lot. But the gym leaders confess something to you when you face them. They confess that they have much stronger Pokemon, and that when you face them, they were basing it off of your skill. This was something that was implied, actually no, outright shown in the Pokemon Origins anime, but this is the first time in the games that it is explained. This explains why Brock is the first gym leader in the first generation for some people. But if you started all the way at, so I don't know, try to think. Let's say you were in Cerulean. Your first gym leader wouldn't have been Brock. You would have had to travel all the way over to him. Wait, no, not Cerulean. Let's, wow, I am drawing a blank on so many. Run away to Cerulean City. That's why I'm thinking about that one. No, you could do that, because then your first one would be Misty. So, yeah. But your first gym leader wouldn't necessarily have been Brock. Digressing, though. The gym leaders admit that they can challenge you in any order, and they would have Pokemon to face you. Which means you should have been able to play the game, in my opinion, in any order. Now, they could have separated it into a first and second half. They could have made it so that the grass, fire, water gym leaders, which are the first three you face, are in one part of the wild, and then there's a gate, and then you go through another one. Personally, I think the game could have been much more open-ended, so that there are different possibilities. That, like, maybe if you went to the grass gym leader last in the set, he was actually harder. It just, to me, it makes a lot more sense for Pokemon to move in this direction. A lot of the complaints about this game, unfortunately, are the ones that we've been making as fans for years. I personally remember X and Y being very short and having a very short post-game. Almost no post-game, actually. This one's very similar to that in feel, which means we're going to get another game at some point, probably in the next 2 years, 2 to 3 years, that's going to fix these problems. We're gonna get some remake. I believe Diamond and Pearl are up next. Those games are long. They are very long games in comparison to this, because you have the whole Garantina content, and if they really wanted to, the Shaman content can be added in there, the Darkrai content. Yeah, there's more that can be added in, and they can easily fix the length problem for the next game. And they probably will. Black and White was short-ish. Point is, the game can be lengthened out and padded out much easier than what they've done. The easiest way that they could have padded out this game is made the wild area bigger and with more to explore. If there was more exploration in the wild area, I would have been happy. All right, and this brings me kind of to like my final point. While the game is short and it's good and I liked it, there are signs that there's more to come. There's an area called the Watchtower Zone. It's located in the wild area, which when you approach it, it says nothing seems to be in this den. I think that's going to be one of our legendary Pokemon. And unfortunately, I think it's going to be in a max raid. So yeah. But overall, I think I got all of the points in my head in some sort of ADHD format down. Now it's time to cut this into pieces and make it into something coherent. Thank you guys for watching me ramble. This is why I can't type these things up, because I can talk about them for hours. Thank you guys again. Wolfie.